And then we come back to Andras's couple of examples that he shared. Let's look at this one, Andras. Is it more complex? Maybe we should start from the endgame puzzle first. Let's start with this one then.
Look,
Was it black to play?
I can talk you through both of them, but
sure.
As in, sorry, that sounded condescending, but I think if I provide context, it becomes a little bit easier. So, student is black.
Yes.
Played a quite decent game to get to this position. In fact, if I recall rightly, a little bit fighting back from behind, actually. So I was very happy to see this endgame arise. And at this point, he made a very, very critical decision, which was to play Rook A2 with black.
Rook A2, yeah, that's the most critical.
Yeah, and I obviously looked at the move panel and I saw the move being played, or it was about to come up. And so when he played it out, I asked him what his justification was to do that. And because of here we are talking about a 1700.com rapid player, of course, it was a very valid justification, which was that I am trading down to a good knight, bad bishop endgame,
right,
where the light squared pawns are potential targets, and I'm playing for a win. And that is a very elaborate, logical, sound reasoning. And this is the level where you first get hit by the very ugly fact that chess is hard.
Yeah.
Because then I prompted him to look at it again, and I asked him, and I wanted to talk about this, by the way, when we brought up the topic of exchanges, is that people all the time assume, within a certain rating range, that when we trade like-for-like pieces, that's an even trade. Whereas at least half of the time, but probably more than that, when you trade like for like, rook for rook, knight for knight, bishop for bishop, you do not trade evenly.
Right.
Because their actual position in the actual game, right there and then, allows them to be superior or inferior. And you must be very clear in your understanding, for example here, that your rook on a3 outclasses the living heck out of the rook on b2.
Sure.
And so, speaking of chess crimes, to trade the rooks off here is a terrible positional or strategic idea, because it actually eases the defense on the white side. Granted, the position remains favorable to black, but I don't consider it winnable anymore. And instead, I just pointed out to him that if you played rook a1 check, I would like to ask you to play this out, please. Rook a1 check, king g2, and rook d1, just for funsies. Have a look at the b2 rook now.
Yes, has no squares whatsoever.
Like, hello? And now, talking about the long-term plans that I told you earlier, by the way, my next step is king to d3.
You move the king all the way to d3.
And you heard that right. Not king g7. I'm going all the way, baby. Why? Because I can.
You can.
Because they can't do a thing. I am completely paralyzing the rook. The bishop is useless. Can't attack anything. I mean, I can put my pawns on black if need be. And I'm walking my king all the way. Well, actually, d4. And at that point, I might move the knight from c3 and penetrate with the king on c3, ultimately accomplishing a fairly easy victory. And instead, he did play rook a2. And actually, this is not winnable. I don't think it is.
Because they can guard a4.
I can guard from a4 now. We are experiencing the concept of the two weaknesses required to win a chess game, and there is only one. It's still preferable. Still, you should pick black any day of the week. And he did win it. Mind you, 99% of the reason for that was because the opponent played really, really poorly. But I found that was a really instructive trade example when the understanding was partially correct. But a broader image needed to be seen. Like, good knight, bad bishop endgame, great. But then we needed to think further that was there something even better. Now, obviously, this is a way higher order thinking. But I thought that this puts at least the concept of trading equal value doesn't translate to trading equal amount. So I don't know how to word it, but or rather I should say that trading like for like doesn't necessarily mean you trade equally.
I think it's also one chess principle that gets in the way here. You know, there are so many conflicting chess principles. You know, we keep saying it's not the pieces that leave the board, but it's the pieces that are remaining that is the most important with piece trades, right? So that principle, I think, is getting in the way, because obviously your knight is better than the bishop. The problem is You just gave up, exchange your amazing rook for that terribly paralyzed rook on b2. Right? Look at this. I really spend a lot of time on this as well in my course, exchanging pieces, because there's a chapter on this specifically, right? Like not trading the opponent's not trading your opponent's bad pieces, for example, or the effect of trading off an amazing piece by the opponent that changes everything, for example, right? Just it also matters a lot which pieces are leaving the board, right? Not only which pieces are remaining, but which pieces are leaving the board. That's extremely important as well. Yeah. Extremely important.
And by the way, one thing that I think is very important about understanding this position correctly, even on lower levels, by the way, is that a lower rated player would very often communicate their idea and justification behind trading the rooks and assuming that that was a full-on even trade, is because in their head, this rook attacks this pawn, this rook defends this pawn, therefore they cancel each other out.
Oof. Oh yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it,
right?
Andras.
Like that is how they perceive it. They are totally even. That's like I have a +1, I have a -1, that's a 0. So I might as well just be rid of them. I just made that up now, but I think I'm striking gold here. And they don't understand that that's not how it works, because mine is attacking, yours is defending. I'm already kilometers ahead. Like that's already reason enough to not to trade, because the value of attacking and reducing your opponent's piece to defending is already kilometers ahead, friends.
So nice. This was such an instructive piece of knowledge that, in my course, I put this game between Botvinnik and Alekhine. I think they played only a single game. In that game, Botvinnik had full domination at that point. Alekhine's rook was on f5, guarding 4 pawns at the same time, right? Like 3 weak pawns at the same time. Alekhine never played with a worse rook in his life. Imagine like rook on f5, and the only purpose is to guard weakness on h5.
It's the Caro Campano.
You know it, right?
Yeah.
And then Botvinnik is... Exactly. Botvinnik's rook is amazing attacking those targets. Then I just ask people, so please evaluate this position. If this rook on c6 is worth 5 pawns, how many pawns is worth Alekhine's rook on f5?
Yeah, exactly.
They are not worth equal, right? You will never trade those rooks, basically. So that's an immensely important lesson to understand, Weaknesses, tie down pieces, the values are not the same.
I use that game for a lot of positional concepts. That game, by the way, essentially refuted that line in the panel, the B6 after 96 B6.
The B6 stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of people repeated not knowing that was Alekhine, Botvinnik Alekhine, but I played a few games myself, by the way, because I played that line with white. So
cool. Yeah, you know your chess classics, Andras. No surprise.
You must.
Beautiful. How about this position? Walk us through, please.
So this one is another super interesting one, right? This guy is about 2000 FIDE. 2000.com rapid. So we are talking very decent strength here, right? With black.
Right.
Yeah?
Right.
Has a very particular style, which is that he's obsessed with initiative and attack. Like he just leaves like that's his bread and butter. Attack. He sends me a game on Discord every week, and most of them are bloody brilliant, like really good stuff. For 2000, he is sacking piece after piece, going after that king like there was no tomorrow. But on the flip side of the coin, he is like a fish out of water in a position where there is no apparent target, especially if the target is meant to be the king. There is no immediate attack, and even the way how initiative materializes or appears on the board is a bit too obscure. Like here for black, if the white king was on c1, this guy would have a field day, right? Like immediately he would play queen b4, a4 pawn sack, just sacked the lot and mate, no worries.
Carnage.
As soon as they castle against him in the Sicilian Dragon, which is what it was, the king's side, the guy's heart just sinks, right? He's just utterly upset, right? And so he ends up in this position where his opponent offers him a queen trade on e3. And instantaneously, he plays queen h5.
He refuses, yes.
He refuses the trade. I think it was queen h5. It may have been e5 first, and then ultimately he ended up on h5, either or. But the concept is that he wanted to build a kingside attack.
Wow, from this position to this king on g1.
Yes, with black.
Wow.
And I'm like, mate, like this is the textbook case. right?
Yeah.
That if you only have a hammer, then every single problem appears to be a nail.
Yes.
Right? Like that is the textbook. That if you have only one tool, then all of your problems will shape, you know, or merge to that tool. And I'm like, why didn't you trade queens? But I knew the answer already, which was that, I don't like trading queens. And this is you know, the type of comment where 2000 is mature enough to understand that chess is about not about what you like and what you dislike above a certain level anyway. It's about objectivity. And objectively, this position is about -2. And the reason why it's -2 because you have the 2 bishops, you have a superior pawn structure, because you have got a beautiful potential to build center in various ways, e6, d5 or c5, e6, d5, whatever. You have a very annoying pressure along the b file. And none of these factors weigh in meaningfully with the queens on, or I should rather say, all of these factors are going to compound when you stir toward an endgame.
Yes.
And so once you get the queens off, all of these things, the 2 bishops, the better pawn structure, the static, well, the 2 bishops is actually a dynamic feature, but nonetheless, it is something that you can just exploit so beautifully. And I looked at this position and I'm like, mate, I can see 20 moves here for black. Which is, by the way, an ultimate testament to how good your position is when you look at your position and you go like, I will trade queens, then I will play rook d8, e6, d5, bishop a6.
Right.
And then I will see what I do. And then you go like, okay, so what is white doing in the interim? And there is not a single move that you could highlight as a problem, a potential plan. Like, can I ask you to just play this out, please? So queen takes, rook takes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't remember. I don't think the edge actually approves of it. But my favorite plan for black here was rook d8, e6, d5.
Just defend the d6 pawn.
Yeah, and then e6, d5. And of course, ultimately, what I would want to do, just pass with the white king between f1 and g1 to transpose the pawn structure. So let's say king f1, e6. And then chuck, well, you know what, play king e1, like let's say we are into whatever. And then d5,
let's say he does something.
D5, ed, cd.
Yeah, of course, we take with the c pawn. Yes,
and look again, the progress we have made. Full central control, d4 pending threat. The bishop on b3 is dead weight. We have opened up the c file. So now I can play bishop a6, rook dc8. And both of my rooks are slicing, dicing along the semi-open fast, threatening to kick pieces and pick up the pawns behind them. What's white doing?
Beautiful.
And the thing is that until you see this done, right? AKA, look at a game by Capablanca, Karpov, you know, Ulf Andersson, whoever.
Right.
And you actually appreciate the simplicity, the beauty, the mental architecture of designing something like this in your head with your pawns and then executing it. It doesn't occur to you. And it especially doesn't occur to you as an advantageous scenario. They look at it, it's a queenless position, it's stale, it's boring, and I don't know what to do.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And all I did was, with an e6, d5 plan, is to just, you know, not right away going headfirst for the kill, but just chill, build, and appreciate the beauty of the position and all the opportunities that arise in a situation like this. Like, he just simply tried to force something into this game that was completely not there. Played queen h5, played king h8, played pawn f5, all kinds of crimes against the position, and ended up losing it actually in the end.
Yeah.
It was an absolute heartbreaking loss for me to observe. I'm not his coach, but I told you earlier, I occasionally help him out with, you know, ideas, and he asks questions and stuff like that. And when I saw that game, I just felt so bad for him because, you know, I really would like him. No, I'm lying. Actually, he managed to draw it. I'm just looking at it now. But I felt so bad for him because the other side of his chess is so good. Like, you give him an attack and, boy, he will cover 200, 300 rating gap like this.
Amazing.
But you give him this and it's a dog's breakfast because he... And the thing is that I think part of the problem is his reluctance to embrace that queenless positions can be fun.
Yes.
They can be engaging. Yes. They can be super instructive. And very often, they can be quite simple.
Yes, yes. I always have satisfaction with those Botvinnik games, Karpov games, long grinds, showing an idea to its full, exploiting long-term weaknesses, organic weaknesses, as you mentioned. There's joy in such games.
Yeah.
And by the way, Silman also talks about this, right? Like those players who just want to induce attacks out of nowhere, basically. They think that, I just want to attack. I feel like attacking. So they do some chess crimes.
Exactly.
It's one of those, yeah.
Yeah.
But this also connects then, right, in terms of question, maybe especially when it comes to queen trade options, because queen trades are the most committal chess exchanges. Maybe then the question becomes, who is better in the long run? Like, who is benefiting from the queen trades? Who is better long-term chances, right? That becomes a very good question to ask yourself.
Yeah.
And to be able to see the bishop pair, the b-file pressure, as Andras mentioned, are those things that are actually favoring black. Thus, queen trade should favor us in general. Yeah.
By the way, I just checked. He played queen b4. To be fair to him, but I mean that is just an utterly meaningless move. No threats, no plan. The whole lot. Like, and what next?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
We will see.
Yeah, I see. But that was a beautiful way to put it, Andras. I mean, when it comes to queen trade, I will show you one more position, by the way. So that's a game between Alekhine and Maroczy. Yeah. So Alekhine and Maroczy is playing. So white to play. So folks also on YouTube, please stop the video. Do you think white should grab the pawn on d4 with the queen here? Or do you see one other move for white in this position?
Oh, by the way, this is in Silman's The Amateur's Mind, which is...
Oh, because you presented that, of course. Amazing. I forgot that, actually. That was in the book. Such an instructive game.
Very much
Such an instructive game. Like development, like those pieces sleeping.
Center with e4 break.
Center with e4 break. It connects to your philosophy as well. Nice.
Big time.
Nice. So in this position, folks, again, we discussed so far in this episode the opponent's resources, right? So if you grab the pawn on d4, what will black do to you? What is the most desirable move for black in this position? I want you to look at the big picture, of course, right? King safety, development, orientation phase, please. Look at the big picture. Then please choose between, let's say, queen d4 or queen c7. I will even give you two choices because you like that, to be given two choices. So if you have two choices, would you go queen c7 or queen takes d4 as white in this position? This actually connects to Andras' point of potential queen trades. Yeah, so Andras, you know the answer, of course, and Alekhine play queen c7 and all black pieces are sort of frozen, right? Like, look at their pieces. Taking up with a single piece. Well, I can improve in 10 different ways, as you mentioned, as white, right? Like take knight d4, bishop c4. And if you ever take on d4, then my pieces are coming to life as well, not to mention bishop c4 ideas and rook f7s and so on. So it looks like it's a total carnage for black. They just lost very, very quickly from this position, actually, right? So something like this happened, I guess, if I'm not wrong. And, Alekhine just attacks him on the king side and look at those pieces, right? And mate, basically, with bishop f7. Amazing. So what was wrong with queen takes d4 then, in terms of the opponent's resources and ideas, right? Then the question becomes, if I rotate the board here, right? That's actually a very nice way to put it. Like, who benefits from the queen trade, right? Because that connects to our first question. Whenever there's a queen trade option that you can force a queen trade, then the question becomes, well, who is benefiting from the queen trade here? Then obviously it's black, right? Because if you play queen c5, you force a queen trade. Why? Because your king is much more unsafe than the white king, right? Like they're attacking you on the king side. Obviously, you should trade the queens ASAP in this position. So it always connects to king safety first and foremost. Also, it connects to organic weaknesses, as Andras mentioned. Who has the better endgame is a great question too. But it also directly connects to the king safety. If you don't trade the queens, then your king gets mated very, very soon. And that's exactly why he didn't take on d4 as white in this position, right? Because he's a very strong player. He looks at the opponent's resources and he avoids the queen trade as white in this position.
This is from my course, man, the Slav.
Oh, I love Slav as well. I didn't actually know that. I didn't study your course properly. Maybe because people ask me on YouTube, make a course on Slav. I'm thinking about that. But maybe you already created a perfect course. Maybe it will be redundant. But I love Slav myself as well. It's such a beautiful opening. Also for beginners, you know.
Man,
like
out of
so logical.
my four opening repertoire, so I've got one white d4, one white d4, one white d4. I have a black e4, e5, and a black d4, d5, which is fundamentally a Slav-oriented course. The fourth, the Slav, is my favorite.
It's amazing.
Because I feel like I first of all managed to find really good lines against all the side lines, London, Collie, all the let's not play chess types of things. But then I also managed to build, I thought, a very succinct yet efficient repertoire around the main lines of the Slav.
Right. Okay. I will then check it. At least tell my students, because maybe there's a course that is already waiting for them on Chessable. Check it out,
the club players one Black D4 D5 is essentially a Slav course.
Okay. Go and check it out, please, because most people on YouTube mentioned this to me. Make a course on Slav. Maybe there's already one that is already perfect. So go and check Andras' course, guys. I mean,
yeah, perhaps we made I don't know if it's the problem is that it's not called a Slav, but it's a black repertoire for D4 D5. But now you just made me think that if the Slav was somehow in the name, it would perhaps make it commercially more attractive, because people assume Queen's Gambit decline, which is exactly what I wanted to avoid at all costs, like the plague. Not because there is anything wrong with it, but I like to teach my students. And by the way, this is not a Slav. I just realized because the bishop.
No, exactly.
Exactly,
it's a different one.
You should never play a game, especially when you are a low-rated player, with the bishop stuck on c8.
Yes.
And every single line, London, Collie, you name it, every single line I put in that course, the bishop is outside the chain.
Beautiful.
Every single time. So that development is perfect.
Yeah. That's exactly what I try to tell my students and create a repertoire around it. And maybe there's already a perfect one. So I will just direct them to your course, Andras. Especially for casual players and beginners. They need much more logical and sound openings with principles. And definitely bishop outside of the chain is a great start already. So
because a lot of people struggle a lot in the Queen's Gambit decline and lower red levels. They find it difficult to liberate the c8 bishop. They end up playing passive chess, and passive chess is your biggest enemy if you want to improve. And also against the Catalan, most of them struggle badly because the Catalan is designed to make you struggle.
Absolutely. So that's what Catalan is for.
Yeah, exactly.
In this position, of course, you're searching for e5 or c5 pawn breaks. Like, this connects to the question of when you reach a middle game, usually, there are some pawn breaks in the position, pawn levers on pawn breaks that liberate your pieces and also allow you to fight for the center, for example. You should also, of course, know the reasons why a pawn break is good, right, for black. Like, I can logically explain to you e5 or c5 being good breaks in this position. They fight for the center. They also maybe liberate one of our bad pieces. For example, the bishop will be liberated after e5.
Yep.
Right? So that becomes your middle game plan, because that's important. Why? Because it will shape where you place your pieces. I made a video about this recently, so sorry for redundancy, guys. Most players in this position goes knight b6 for a single hit on the bishop, and after the bishop drops back, this knight is now sadly missed on d7 because there is no more support on e5 or c5 pawn breaks. And this knight is misplaced. Then they go knight d5, wishful thinking. They are wishing and hoping that they will trade on d5, which, as we discussed today, happens all the time below 1500. All the exchanges are blind. They take on d5, chess crime, and this way they liberate their bad pieces. Thus, bad habits are reinforced, right? Because they don't punish for such, they don't get punished for such mistakes. Then they keep playing those moves over and over again, right?
It's a coach curse when your student plays a really bad move, like a strategic total fiasco, and they win. And they very often, by the way, erroneously make absolutely false memories, which is insane to me. But even worse, by the way, because this is easy to fix, because they make an erroneous memory, but as soon as you point out that hello, and if they had played e4, then what?
Yes.
Yeah, and then it usually overwrites. But the reverse, oh man, that takes years to weed out. When they lose a game, and they fabricate a reason in their head based on their narrative of what happened in that game as to why they lost it. And very often, that narrative has no touch whatsoever with reality. Like, imagine you play in this position, bishop d6. That's a perfect example. Yeah? Either you play e5, opponent plays e4, and we play queen c7.
Oof.
Yeah? And we lose to e5. And we have a discussion with student. 2 months later down the track, the same position occurs. And by the way, bishop d6 is quite a decent move here. The idea is e5 next, right?
For sure, exactly.
And
like
then,
e5 here.
And then the student, instead of going to d6, goes to e7. And I'm like, why are you going to e7? And it's like, oh, well, first of all, on b4 I wasn't doing anything. I wanted to come back, but I remember I lost the game when I played bishop d6. That was a terrible move.
Yeah, this was not the reason why you lost that game. It was because of queen c7. Yes,
and I do not want to highlight my importance or yours or chess coaching, but when you don't have someone to weed this out of your head, it is so easy to make a myriad of these vague memories of lost games and the reasons for it, and the bad decisions just snowball. And you go from one bad call to another, because now we played bishop d6, correct, then we played queen c7, horrid. We didn't fix queen c7. We instead now made a different mistake, which was bishop e7, which is likely going to lead to another loss, another false memory, and it's just a never-ending escalation of completely wrong conclusions in otherwise healthy positions. And
Amazing.
So I really do think that in this regard, a coach, and I really am not promoting either myself or you, is often an irreplaceable value, because all the engine is going to tell you that queen c7 loses a piece, bruv.
Yes.
Yeah, but
and then you misattribute, without the coach, you misattribute to this loss to bishop d6, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because you didn't work with the coach.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, of course, there is every chance that you can also, learn from it without a coach, but good luck if you are starting from scratch.
Right. The whole process becomes much more efficient with the coach help in those cases.
Yeah, because then you immediately weed out the misconceptions, and you reinforce that actually, no, bishop d6 was great. Kudos to you. Brilliant. You should do that again. Oh, but I lost. But that's not why you lost. You lost because of queen c7 blundered a piece. And it's human nature that you very often, I'm pretty sure there's a psychological phenomenon, I don't know this, that when something bad happens to you, you immediately associate it with something else that happened on that day to you, which in logical world has nothing to do with it, right?
Right.
Yeah?
Right.
So let's say that, I don't know, someone, accidentally opened their car door onto mine and there is a scratch on it. And it happened on the day when they collected the green waste from my house. And the human mind is such that you make connections like that. It's weird, but it makes some sense because, of course, green waste collection is on Thursday and it happens on Thursday. But then your brain tends to escalate into, oh my God, it's green waste collection today, I better watch my car, which has absolutely no connection whatsoever. Just because it's Thursday and green waste gets collected, your likelihood of the car getting scratched is not higher. But your brain is already wired into this loop of connecting this. And I think that this is exactly what happens in some chess cases where two chess facts overlap and they blend it into one memory. Right? I lost.
Incredible.
Because of bishop d6. My car got scratched because my green waste was taken. What? What's the connection? There is none, right? But because of its subconscious and psychological, I find that it happens an awful lot. And I find it difficult, by the way, to address this in any other way. And I have a student who has the tendency, by the way, to always come up with these vague notions of, oh, I did once there and then I got burnt. And I'm like, okay, show me. Show me exactly what happened when you did that and you got burnt. Because I guarantee you that we are relying here on vague memories that are not actually even remotely identical to what we are looking at now. And in fact, you are missing out on the best move here because of a completely different scenario that happened to you half a year ago in a very different position.
Absolutely. All those associations, especially when it comes to dangerous stimuli. That,
exactly.
Stimuli,
The danger and the loss is particularly important here. The negative memories.
And
I don't think we make the same on the positive side, by the way. So that's a very good observation by you, that it's the negative stimuli that creates this kind of weird phenomenon.
Right. It's a biologically pervasive phenomenon. It also happens in rats, for example, right? Like when they drink a bad substance, and then they're right. Like after many hours, they get like suffered, and they associate all kind of stimuli in their environment to that bad experience. Basically, they start avoiding random stuff that they saw on that particular day, for example, right? So that's a very, very conserved biological phenomenon you're talking about right now. especially around dangerous, risky stimuli, basically. So I think this requires a separate episode on its own, right? Like these psychological causes, how they affect our chess play, right? Our biology. And
as
all
if
these
we don't have
factors,
enough
basically.
problems on the chessboard now, we have got psychology thrown in, right?
Exactly, Andros. Yeah, as if we solved all the chess problems so far. But yeah, going back to this position, folks, just in case you're worried about, of course, I mean, we are playing for e5 or c5 breaks. Thus, I am placing my queen on e7 or maybe on a5, just to be able to support these two breaks. And I want to keep my knight on d7 because e5 or c5 is coming next. So you see, asking what pawn break I'm playing for will shape your middle game play and piece placement in the middle game. And after the opening stage, this becomes very important in so many openings as well. That could be relevant. For example,
can I show you another very typically occurring mistake in much lower rated players' games that are incredibly frequent? Can you take back queen d8 and e6, e5? Sorry. So
yes.
When a position like this occurs, one of the most common questions, which by the way is a really good question, and I enforce it, like ask that. It's a good question. They ask, where am I putting my c8 bishop?
Nice.
Right? And I like to tell that because I like to create a little bit of a conflict in their thinking and a bit of a provocation. Nowhere. It stays where it is. And they go like, but what about development? And I'm like, do you see a good square for that bishop right now? Oh, I could play b6, bishop b7, which by the way is not that bad here. I'm like, okay. And what about if we could put the bishop on g4 instead? Yeah, but that's not possible. Oh, is it not?
Aha. Like reverse engineering again, like find a way to make that bishop go to g4.
But this is again a bit of a higher order thinking, because here we are overruling the principle of we need to develop as soon as possible and every piece out. Yeah. And so it requires a better understanding and a deeper understanding that we actually can afford time-wise to play queen e7, e5, open up the bishop, and then it will go to f5, e6 sometimes, or g4 even. And there's no hurry to play b6, bishop b7, because, as I like to call it, you didn't develop it, you moved it.
Right. Beautiful way of putting it, Andras. Yeah.
Because in the meantime, we get hit with e5, e4, e5.
e4, e5 is coming very soon as well, right?
And when we trade on d5, our bishop on b7 will be blocked with the d5 pawn, and
it's
going to be a catastrophic, terrible piece. Actually. Worse than on c8.
Yeah. So timing is also very important here. So e4 is coming, and we have to make sure that we play e5 in this position, basically, right? So this is actually quite a standard way to release the bishop, and this is fine because f4 doesn't work for white because of this. Yeah, so black is in very good shape in this position, actually. Like, also look at the effect of your c6 pawn. That's the reason you didn't push c5, because that pawn is burying that knight, as I used to say. Like, I mean, this is a beautiful pawn to have, but you activate your bishop this way.
And if you just play out here, I don't even know. No, leave it. I don't even know, because now we are threatening bishop c3, queen e4. So let's just say argument sake bishop d3, right?
Right.
And now your bishop on c8 has a free reign on the diagonal, and you can do pretty much whatever you want.
Beautiful.
Yeah, bishop e6 or whatever.
Yep.
Now go back, please, to the starting position. And let's see what happens if we actually develop the bishop. So let's go b6.
Right.
e4. Bishop b7, e5, knight d5. Now in this position, I'm not sure if knight e4 is best. Potentially it is.
Could be, yeah.
That's, I think, the move I would play, but I wanted to demonstrate knight d5, c d5.
Right.
Bishop d3.
Look at the bishop on b7.
And now let's talk about how successful our development of the b7 bishop was. It's a catastrophe, right? Like by far the worst piece on the board. Yes, and h7 is hanging with check. There's a king side attack coming.
Yes, indeed.
It's misery.
It's a full misery. The bishop also got active. This is a scenario we want to avoid as black as well. So,
actually, mainline Slav looks like this, with the b7 bishop being on g6.
Oh yeah, exactly. Imagine you teleport your bishop to g6, right? That's what Slav does to you, right? If you want to play with the bishop on g6 in such positions, please, folks, follow Andras and check out his course. Beautiful way to solve your bishop problem. Yeah, I mean, this is just nice. Like, just to connect to the episode, I mean, just to pawn breaks and so on, because many people also ask me those pawn chain questions, right? We see this typical King's Indian pawn chain here. I think that's a game between Anand and Carlsen, if I'm not wrong. Carlsen with the black pieces. So again, this also connects to our worst place piece question. So I want you to ask yourself this question. What is black's worst place piece in this position, and which pawn break is black playing for in this case? Right, folks? On YouTube, ask yourself these two questions, and then one idea should come to your mind naturally. talking about pawn chains, Andras, did you ever play King's Indian in your life, my friend?
Oh man, I am a diehard King's Indian fan. I played King's Indian for almost my entire junior period between the age of 13 to, well, junior ends on 18, but I actually, well, up to date.
Right.
Up to date, yeah. I have been a diehard King's Indian fan.
Cool.
Lost some beautiful ones, won some beautiful ones, as you do.
As you always do, right?
Yeah, I mean, with the King's Indian, it rarely ends, in a dull draw.
No, exactly. So then you have great intuition about such positions, because even without the King's Indian bishop, let's say, light square bishop is gone, black is a very natural plan in this position, right? We are definitely playing for g4, as we put it, right? The pawn chain is pointing that way. Clearly g4 is our main break on the king side to open up lines and so on, to activate our pieces. While look at the effect of this knight on d7, it's making it more difficult for white to push c5 in this position. White is playing for the break c5 in this case, of course. So it's a nice, pawn chain question. All the pawns are still there. How about this knight on g7, right? Fianchetto knights are usually terrible in chess, as Andras knows, right? This is a terrible piece on g7. So then, what did Carlsen do? He played a move with this knight that also supported this break g4. In other words, should we play this knight to e8 or this knight to f6? Because you have choices, right? Like this knight on f6 also supports g4. But why do you then play this knight to e8 and not this knight to d7? This then, comes to the multi-purposeness. He played knight e8, of course, to play knight f6 and g4. And he kept his knight on d7 because it was making it more difficult for white to push c5 in this case. Later he played knight f6 and then g4 and then opened up the g file, entered through the g8 with his heavy pieces and won a very nice game from this position. So again, just connects, right, to our concept. Okay, what is my bad piece here? Which break am I playing for? And Carlsen uses those questions, of course, automatically, without ever consciously asking himself. That's also one thing, right, for strong players. I mean, these processes are just automatized. Like, he doesn't sit down and ask himself this question as if, it's like, when you're learning how to ride the car, right, Andras? Like, we have to go through this checklist questions. Yep. Did I check my blind spot, right, before turning? Like, did I control everything, handbrake before leaving? All these questions are very useful for beginners, amateurs that are just learning how to ride the car. But over time, as you practice more, then no more such questions. They will be part of your second nature, basically. Hence, yeah.
Yes, sorry, go on. No, you're gone. I will go after.
So that's exactly why these questions might be more relevant for those casual players, beginner players that want to fix those thought process patterns. And maybe we can also talk about then the right medium to exercise those questions, right? What could be the right time control medium then, Andras, for those players to try to implement those questions we discussed today?
Yeah, look, with time control, I always am a big fan of the longer the better.
Right.
Yeah, it's right. Extremely unlikely to come by an idea like knight e8, knight f6, let's say on 1400 level in a blitz game. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go out on a limb and make a very risky statement. If you play in a blitz game here, knight e8, knight f6, you're definitely not 1400.
Probably true.
Right? Yeah. I could be wrong. Like, obviously, if we threw it at 1400 rated players, some would find it. And I don't mean any disrespect, by the way, whatsoever. It's just the nature of blitz, more so than the nature of the player.
Right.
If you throw the same position at 1400 rated in rapid, far more likely. Especially if you, have a discussion with them about how to use time, because sometimes you find that even though they play rapid, they play blitz.
Right.
Yeah, so once the good habits are developed in terms of time consumption, you will find, I think, rapid in general, by the way, is a time control that I really like to ask my students to play because it's long enough to be meaningful, but short enough so that it doesn't turn into wasted time.
Yeah, we discussed the value of blitz with Nate Solon in the last episode, and that was also sort of my stance on this, right? Rapid is definitely much better than blitz in general, just to have some time for those processes to take place, that you can go slowly, right?
Yeah, interesting to observe here, by the way. I don't know about you, but for me, about 80%, no more than that, 90% of my current students are adults. And
me too.
You find that there is an immense gap between their blitz rating and their rapid rating, or even more so with blitz and long time control. There's the discrepancy often is like 500 rating points. You do it with kids, and there is almost always a total overlap. Total overlap of blitz skills, like blitz 200 and 2200, rapid 2200, blitz 1700, rapid 2200. It's because they learn differently. I mean, there have been a lot of studies written on this, and I'm pretty sure that most of them would contradict what I'm saying because there's no science backing me. But I guarantee you that what I'm telling you is very, very close to the truth. That the younger you go, the more they overlap. The older you go, especially with those who started chess when they were already grown-ups, bullet and blitz habits develop extremely slowly, sometimes not at all.
Interesting.
Which is not to say that they are hopeless at chess. It's just that the whole processing is structured differently, takes longer, and they are still perfectly capable of finding best moves, the same way our kids do, if the time is given. As soon as you shrink the time, with grown-ups it's going to be defensive, safety, survival mode, unnecessary traits to simplify, all this jazz. Kids will go attack, sack, dynamic, the right way to play, basically.
So interesting. Because I haven't worked with so many kids, so I can't really compare, but that's what you're saying is probably true. And I'm just thinking about the potential reasons for that, right? Like, it somehow becomes in their system for kids, because to me, playing good blitz is like your intuition has developed, right? Like you don't need so much time to find those moves. So somehow those patterns are ingrained in your memory, so you can quickly access those patterns without much thinking, actually.
I think that's part of it, though, but not the full picture, because I also think that adults tend to distrust those patterns when they don't have the time to actually work it out, to justify it. So they know that it's right, but they don't trust it. You know what I mean? Like they would like to be in that safety zone of, I think that's the good move, let me check. Right? But there is no time for that in blitz, so they want to play something that is safe. By the way, safe, in my coaching philosophy, safe is the first ultimate step toward making a mistake. When you are looking for safe moves, you are usually looking for bad moves. Right.
So then should it contradict what we just talked about today in this episode, right? Because we were talking about basic safety factors, but there are different processes, right? Because that's a thought process issue. Like the opponent makes a move and you see their next move. Hopefully that doesn't bring you to this passive mindset mode, right? That's also very important.
Let me tell you how I think it feeds into it rather than contradicts it. Remember the example with Queen B6 attacking B2?
Yes.
The safe move that they are looking for is Rook A B1. That is the safe move, right? Because it defends the pawn.
Right.
And in a blitz context, it would be exactly that. They know that taking a B2 pawn with a queen is a crime against humanity, but if I don't see how that loses by force, I will defend it because that's safe.
It's so interesting because one of my students had the same exact issue, and he came up with a checklist question, the acronym WTF checklist acronym, because it was also very memorable in his mind. I made a video about this on YouTube. Is WTF right? Is WTF your recipe for disaster or for success? So W goes for weakness, which means what is the weakness of the opponent's last move? He starts with that question first, just to avoid, right? Just to avoid the thing that I just mentioned. The weakness of Queen B6, those bishops are loose, basically. And then he checks the threat, right? T stands for threat, and then forcing moves. Do I have a forcing move in this position that wins? Super interesting, actually. And he's an adult person, of course, a very smart adult person. And again, with a big discrepancy between his long rating, rapid rating, and blitz, if I'm not wrong.
Right.
So he's struggling with the same issues, actually. So I think we're pointing to something interesting that is speaking to adult improvers. And please, guys, my YouTube followers, they are mostly adult improvers, so let us know, give us some feedback.
Yeah, likewise. I'm watched by a fair few adult improvers too, and the Chess Punks community, by far and large, is adult improvers. So we're definitely talking about it. By the way, I cannot help but tell you this. Whilst you were looking at the King's Indian game, I recreated very quickly, I hope somewhat correctly, definitely not full correctly, a blitz game between Korchnoi and Fischer. Can you please bring that up on the board? I'm not sure, of all the fine details, but the quintessential idea is the same. And the reason why, of course, it occurred to me was because we were looking at the King's Indian structure and how to make g4 work. And which is my worst piece, which, by the way, is the best.
I think I know the answer, by the way. Is this the... Okay, sure I won't spoil it. I won't spoil it. I know this beautiful move, of course. Yes.
Yeah. So, obviously, the worst piece is the f8 bishop, but the f8 bishop can't support the g4 break. So, then you go like, what's the next step? And then, I don't want to spoil it. So, if you want to take over, I would like you to take the glory and you can solve it and communicate it.
Yes, please, guys, stop the video here. Just like in our last example with Carlsen, we are searching for a multi-purpose move for black in this position that both supports our g4 break, but also, improve one piece that in a square that actually supports that break, so to speak, right?
Yep.
Especially look at this knight on g6. It can maneuver to a nice point that supports our break g4 in this position. Because g4 cannot be played directly. I guess Korchnoi made sure that it cannot play directly in this position.
That's why this bunker defense with f2 knight, e2 bishop, h3.
True.
And, and all that jazz,
All that jazz is just to stop g4. And you're a great player, as I used to say, if you found the move knight h8, right? Am I correct, Andras, or am I blundering?
Yes, no.
Okay.
You are fully on the money.
So knight h8 was Fischer's choice, right? Fischer played knight h8.
Yeah.
What's the point? Knight f7, h6, and g4 is coming. Bam.
Like I said, I'm almost certain that I didn't quite perfectly recreate the position. Like the queenside stuff, I mostly made it up. But the idea was this very cute maneuver. Now, what was really astounding about this, by the way, but obviously we are discussing here the talent of probably the most talented world champion ever. I mean, maybe even that is not an overstatement. That he found this over the board, having never seen this idea before, in a blitz game.
In a blitz game, yes. That was a blitz game.
Dude, you give me half an hour and I will settle for knight h4 every day of the week. Because that's the natural way to just go forward and sack g4 and then hope for the best and lose miserably.
Right. Amazing vision in a blitz game for Fischer to find this entire idea of knight h6 and g4, and he won very, very quickly, if I'm not wrong. Everything is just absolutely beautiful.
And to be fair, and I don't think I'm going to commit sacrilege by saying this, but I would. No, I'm going to say this. I would say that Korchnoi was definitely a greater expert of the King's Indian than Fischer was.
Right.
Yeah.
With the white pieces.
So Korchnoi played the classical King's Indian and this particular line throughout his entire career.
Many times.
And beat everyone with it who counts. Lost to everyone who counts too, like Kasparov in particular, a fair few occasions. But boy, he won some insane games. Whereas Fischer was on and off, right? Like he played a lot of Nimzov or a lot of Grünfeld. He was not anywhere near the level of dedicated to the King's Indian the way Kasparov was.
True.
So here we are talking of a much more of an expert behind the white pieces than the black.
Yeah. And you attribute to his talent, basically, right? That's how we define talent in chess.
Yeah, that's just, I mean, Fischer was an enigma in this regard.
Yeah. The speed of processing, the speed of finding those moves, and the execution part as well. Yeah, it's just amazing.
Yeah.